Yeah, I think let's. Yeah, it's not 10 on my clock yet.
Yeah, it's 2 minutes too. We got lots of people starting to join in here. That's great.
Okay, nice.
How many people were registered, John?
About 70.
That's good.
And we are recording too, so everyone knows.
Are we going to post it on the UMF and also Ontario Woodlot Association website?
Yeah, we'll put it up to YouTube and we'll share the link all over social media, and it'll be available for some time to come. So
okay, that's great. Thanks.
Yeah. We're up past about 28 people in total, including ourselves.
How many did you say? Sorry.
70 were registered, and usually better than half show up. So we'll probably be about 40, 50. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. People come and go too.
Okay, I have 10 here. Maybe let's take I don't know, we don't want to be too late, but maybe let's take a minute or two.
Whenever you feel comfortable, that's great.
I'm good. I just want to make sure that everyone joins. I'm okay.
And I've set it up so everyone can share their screens. We're all set. Good. Oh yeah, we're getting up near 40, 35, 40 total.
Oh, nice. Okay, good. Wonderful.
Oh, Lacey Rose sent a message. Thanks for having this. Nice to see everybody.
Same thing here, Lacey.
Yeah. Oh, Mike Rosen. Hey, Mike. Just to say that I registered days ago. Oh, I don't see what he had there.
That was in the chat.
Chat.
But did not receive any Zoom links. Oh, he got the link a few minutes ago.
That's good. Yeah, it seems Zoom, sometimes things go to spam or are treated as junk mail, unfortunately, when you do the mass mail out from Zoom. So yeah, Joanne was standing by for anyone who had that difficulty. So that's good. I'm glad you're here, Mike.
Okay, it's 10:01. I don't know what's your, do you want to start slowly? Anyway, like by the time I'm finished and we are finished, I'm sure everyone is going to be in. So we should be good. Yeah, it's 10:02. Let's go ahead. You good? Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm sure you can see that my name is Annonciade Murat. I will be your moderator for today. So just briefly about me, I'm a registered professional forester and I work as an economist at the Canadian Forest Service. But today I'm here as a representative of the Eastern Ontario Model Forest, the Ontario Woodlot Association, and the CIF Ottawa Valley section, which are together bringing you this event. So today we will speak about the role of forests in global environmental challenges and how we can fight climate change and biodiversity loss through natural resource management. So just wanted to let you know, at the end of the presentations, we'll have a 20 minutes session for questions and answers. So just wanted to encourage everyone, if you have any questions, send them through the chat, and then I'll read them at the end to the speakers. So I think John said that at the beginning, but just a reminder, the session will be recorded and we'll be posting the video later on our websites. So you can have access to that later. So let's move to the introduction. But before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone that Ottawa is built on unceded Algonquin Anishinaabe territory. And in this regard, we'll hear an opening message from the Executive Director of the Ontario Woodlot Association and the Eastern Ontario Model Forest, John Pino. Go ahead, John.
Thank you very much. The Eastern Ontario Model Forest, the Canadian Institute of Forestry, Ottawa Valley Section, and the Ontario Woodlot Association wishes to honor the Indigenous people who have been the protectors of this land, known as Turtle Island, for more than 10,000 years. We begin this meeting by acknowledging the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of many First Nations and First Nations communities. Today, our gathering place is home to Indigenous, Métis, and Inuit peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here. Acknowledging in this way reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous peoples. Miigwech.
Thank you, John. So next we'll hear a brief welcoming message from our EOMF president, Tony Bell.
How do you do, everybody? And thank you very much for joining this session. Our group are really keen about the idea of how forests play a huge role at all levels in our society, both to protect our biodiversity and to provide us as people in the using forests for recreation to add to our own personal health as well. And so on behalf of the Eastern Ontario Model Forest, thank you very much for joining this session.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Next, I'd like to pass it over to Ken Farr, the chair of the CIF Ottawa Valley section.
Well, thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. I'm speaking as the chair of the local section of the Canadian Institute of Forestry, which is the oldest forest society in Canada. And one of the functions of that society is to foster public awareness of forestry issues. And I think the issue that's presented today is about linkages from local to global and from urban forests to forest regions and biomes. And I think the message is that there's a continuity along that whole sequence, and it's very important to think at every scale. So thank you very much. Merci tout le monde, and I'll hand it back to our chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, everyone. With no further ado, our first speaker will be Nick Stowe, who will speak about the importance of trees and parks in an urban or near urban environment. But first, a little bit about Nick. Nick is a husband, father, and grandfather who has lived for the past 30 years in Ottawa on the traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. His hometown is Esquimalt, British Columbia, on the traditional territory of the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nation of the Coast Salish people. As the senior planner in the Natural Systems and Rural Affairs team at the City of Ottawa, Nick provides advice to city management and council on all matters related to the protection, sustainable management, and enhancement of the city's natural heritage system, its network of urban and rural forests, wetlands, grasslands, and other natural features. He is a member of the official plan team, developing and implementing policies for the protection of natural heritage features and values. He coordinates and manages multidisciplinary, sub-watershed-based land use planning studies, as well as a wide range of other ecological and environmental projects and studies. He supports other city departments, regularly participating in the review of major or challenging department applications, sitting on technical advisory committees for environmental assessment, and providing direct advice on environmental questions and challenges. But prior to that, Nick worked as a childcare counselor for disturbed adolescents before returning to university to study biology. He obtained a PhD in ecology from the University of Ottawa in 2005, having completed a thesis on impacts of selection cutting on northern hardwood forests. He has taught the wetland ecology module of the environmental sciences field course at the University of Ottawa, and for the past 2 years, he has taught the forest ecology module of the environmental sciences field course at the University of Ottawa as well. So Nick, I'll let you share your presentation with us. We don't see it yet, but well, we don't hear you. I think you're on mute.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to share my screen right now. Okay, for heaven's sake. From the beginning. Okay, there we go. Is that, can you see my presentation now?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay, so thank you very much, and I will apologize right now for the length of that introduction. I hadn't realized I'd sent such a lengthy, lengthy introduction. That must have come from my CV or something. So I appreciate the invitation to speak about the importance of trees and parks in an urban environment. It's something that I deal with and my colleagues deal with every day at the City of Ottawa. It's one of the main focuses of our work at the moment. The Natural Systems and Rural Affairs Unit, we deal, as was described, with really the natural environment and policies for the natural environment in both the rural and urban areas of the city. That includes our urban forest. We have in Ottawa I consider to be a very healthy urban forest. Across the city as a whole, we have about 30% forest cover. We have about 30% forest cover in Ottawa's urban area. It is, when I say forest, that's urban forest cover, so that's street trees and trees on private property and larger forested area, woodlot areas. It's about 30% forest cover in our urban area. We have about 35% forest cover in the National Capital Greenbelt, which is part of our urban area. So that's about 15,000 hectares. And residential areas of the city, it tends to be around about 25%. And we recently, in our new official plan, set a long-term target of 40% canopy cover. So we have a very healthy urban forest cover, but we also have a long way to go in achieving what we would really like to see. And we've taken some substantial steps toward that. We have, several years ago, my colleague Martha Copestake brought forward Ottawa's Urban Forest Management Plan, which sets out a 20-year plan for growing our urban forest. We have several years ago come up with significant woodlands policies that outline how we identify the values of significant woodlands, whether they're in the rural area or the urban area. We've brought forth new tree policies in our official plan that strengthen protections for the urban forest, and that's accompanied by a strengthened tree conservation bylaw. We recently added a new planner to our team, one who works specifically with the Committee of Adjustment, one of the planning committees at the city. This one deals with minor variances and severances and things that affect trees in ways people may not realize. We've developed new processes for how we consider trees early in our planning processes, new tools for doing that. And continuing to move forward, my colleague Martha will be working on a new tree planting strategy that will transition us from a reactive tree planting approach to a proactive targeted tree planting approach in the urban area. And I'm currently working on a green space and urban forest master plan. Being a master plan, it sits sort of at the same level in our planning hierarchy as our transportation master plan, our infrastructure master plan. It really deals with it at a very high level. So I'm working on that with the goal of having that completed in the next couple of years. I think all of this reflects a real culture change at the city, which has been a long time coming and which we've been working hard at doing. I don't think there's any strong resistance now at the City of Ottawa to the idea that the urban forest is important, that it provides us with an enormous number of benefits, and that we really need to pay attention to its condition and where it's headed in the future. But to be quite honest, when I started to put this together, this presentation together, I got kind of stuck. I was stymied. I thought, okay, what am I going to talk about? Because I don't think there's a lot of debate now about the value of the urban forest. We know all the things that it contributes for us. We know that it is green infrastructure. Every tree is a big water pump. It helps us deal with urban runoff, both through evapotranspiration, infiltration of runoff. We know that it's important for shade and for mitigation of urban heat island. We know that it does make, it makes a contribution to urban biodiversity, although quite honestly, I think that's sometimes overestimated. There are a whole bunch of ecosystem services we know that the urban forest provides. This is a table that we developed a number of years ago when we were working on our significant woodlands policies to sort of summarize all of the services that the urban forest provides. I don't think there's any real debate about this. The questions that I deal with these days, and that are the most challenging for me to deal with when I'm working on the urban forest, the Green Space and Urban Forest Master Plan, or when we're working on our tree planting strategy, is to whom is the urban forest important, and who chooses which values are most important. And we know from long experience, when we're doing a public consultation, whether it's online or in person, when we're holding a public information meeting or public consultation meeting, the people that we get out to those meetings are not representative of our broader community. We also know that there are many underrepresented groups who either don't come out to these meetings, whose views are not heard for a whole variety of reasons. And the urban forest is as important to, and urban green space is as important to them as it is to the people who routinely turn out to our meetings. And so we're really faced with a challenge in Ottawa these days of how do we engage with these people, and how do we determine what's important to everybody and not just a segment of our society. And we're also dealing with a lot of cultural differences. So, there's a good history of research, good research looking back at the history of the whole idea of nature, and particularly in North America. I would argue that our view of nature, rural nature, wilderness, even urban nature, has become dominated by what's known as the preservation movement, which is a fairly recent and Western approach to the idea of nature that started basically with John Muir about 100 years ago. It's not a perspective that is shared by everyone, and perhaps not even by the majority of people. I tend, when I look at the two photographs on this slide, I mean, the one on the left appeals to me. That's my idea of what nature is. That's a picture of my son, looking up at a couple of white pines. But for a lot of people, nature, who come from maybe a European or a Middle Eastern background, or even an Indigenous background, the idea of nature is much more integrated with the idea of human culture. And I've spent time in the Middle East, for example, and the contact that people have with nature in the Middle East is within the courtyards. These trees, these cultured landscaped areas within courtyards, whether they're private or public. And that's something we have to consider, is that lots of people look at the urban forest and urban green space a lot differently than we might think. And when we look at that and consider that, then there are a couple other questions that arise. And again, these are questions that I have to deal with all the time. My team deals with all the time. So to whom do urban trees and green space really belong? The picture on the left here is taken from alongside one of our urban creeks in Ottawa. It runs through a subdivision, and there's definitely a perception by the homeowners lining that creek that is their green space. To the extent that they will extend their gardens, and you can see a little bit of here, they will extend their gardens beyond the limit of their property line and start landscaping the areas within that corridor. We have other areas of the city where we have planned and prepared to put in pathways through green spaces, and had property owners oppose that because they regard that as their green space. They don't want other people in there making use of it. On the other, to the other side of things, we have traditional users of green space. We have, for example, the mountain biking community or bird watching community that regards these spaces as their own. They are the ones who have used it most in the past, and particularly we've seen in COVID, we've seen increasing tensions between users as more people make use of green space during COVID. There's been some resentment and conflicts developing between the people who traditionally use those areas and the new people who are in those areas. There's a question of who belongs in green space. So one of the things that I often hear, and this is the way I kind of represent it, is we love children in green space provided they behave like adults. So as long as they're staying on the pathways and doing passive activities in our urban green space and our urban forest, that's great. But we don't want them in there building stick forts or tree forts or going off the trail or taking their bikes through those areas, because they're having an impact on the natural value of it. There's the whole issue of racism and in the idea of who belongs in urban green space. There's a quite a well-known movement, the Black in Nature movement. This is the central photograph here is a friend of mine, Peter, and he will describe how uncomfortable it is sometimes for him to be out in a natural area or to encounter someone when he's walking in the forest, and they comes around a corner and sees the reaction of people when they see a young Black man in a wooded area, and they immediately feel a threat. That is a concern. Who belongs in nature? And the photograph on the right is my wife having a little snooze on a park bench, which I don't think anybody would object to. But if this was a homeless person covered with newspapers or a garbage bag, what would be the reaction there? Does he belong or she belong there or not? So the whole question of who belongs in urban green space is a really tough one. And what is permitted in urban green space? We have a lot of organizations. Well, I won't say a lot. We have some very strong and some very effective organizations in Ottawa, groups I deal with all the time, who are involved in stewardship of urban natural areas, of the urban forest. And we really value working with them. They do great work. They help us where we don't have the resources to do a lot of work. but sometimes it can be exclusionary. And so we do get groups who regard, an urban forest as a place to be naturalized, as a reflection of the wilderness. The urban forest, urban natural area should be a reflection of the wilderness. And so when proposals come up that don't necessarily coincide with that view, there can be conflicts arise. I would say the one we deal with most these days is mountain biking. Ottawa has a very, very large, very active mountain biking community. It's probably expanded more in the last 2 years in response to COVID, as people looking for ways to get out. It's not just multi-use pathways through forested areas, but it's off track. It's rougher tracks, more challenging tracks in some of our areas like the South March Highlands Conservation Forest, or an urban green space like Carlington Park, where we have seen conflicts between people who view that as an area to be naturalized and people who actually are making more use of it for active recreational purposes. So what is permitted in urban green space is now becoming a big challenge for us. And so I think as we move forward and as we deal more actively and with our policies around our urban forest, around our urban green spaces, it's not the questions on the left of this slide that are really going to be the challenging ones. I don't believe that there's really any debate about, the importance for the urban forest in terms of maintaining biodiversity and stormwater reduction and shade and heat island mitigation, reducing energy footprint, physical health, mental health. We know all of these values. They're incorporated into our urban forest management plan. They're incorporated into our significant woodlands policies. They're going to be incorporated, we have acceptance of this. We've seen that culture change at the city. The difficult conversation is going to deal with the questions on the left: Indigenous title, conservation versus recreation, equity, access, gender, racism. These are the issues that are really challenging us and that we're really going to have to deal with as we move forward. To look more closely at how we manage our forest. So I guess to summarize, when we're talking about the urban forest, it's urban. And the defining characteristic of the urban forest, the thing that makes it distinct from rural forest, wilderness, is that human element. And that's really the challenge for us when we're talking about it. Thanks.
Thank you, Nick. It was a great presentation, and I think we are right on time, so that's great. Awesome. So next, our second speaker will be Glenn Prevost on how to protect our climate and natural biodiversity in Southern Ontario. So just briefly about Glenn. Glenn lives in North Bay with his wife and 2 very young boys. Together, they enjoy the outdoors and, on the rare occasion, a full night of sleep. His family can attest that Glenn loves forest and sustainable forest management, as he's always talking about something related to forestry. Glenn is currently the program coordinator for the Eastern Ontario Model Forests and the Ontario Woodlot Association. His professional career includes working in consulting, research, and academia in both the private and public sectors. He has a Master in Forest Conservation degree from the University of Toronto and a Master of Applied Science degree in Civil Engineering from McMaster University. Glenn is a Managed Forest Plan approver under the Managed Forest Tax Incentive Program, MFTIP. He has completed the Ontario Tree Marking course, and he is a registered professional forester. He is a member of the Ontario Woodlot Association Near North Chapter, and is currently the director of the Canadian Institutes of Forestry's Algonquin section. Before working in forestry, Glenn worked as a professional engineer in the area of industrial energy efficiency. So that's it. Go ahead, Glenn.
All right, I'll share my screen. Okay.
Yeah, we see
You
it.
can see that. All
Yeah.
right. So I'm talking today. I have the pleasure of talking about our certification program that we have here at the Eastern Ontario Model Forest Ontario Woodlot Association, and how that program can really enhance our natural spaces, biodiversity, human values, and carbon sequestration as well. I'll skip over this and get to the presentation. That was a good introduction, Annonciade. Thank you. So I want to talk about the Forest Stewardship Council certification standard that we adhere to at the Eastern Ontario Model Forest for certifying smaller areas in Southern Ontario, and how those principles bring value to our members and the people who use and value the forest and live in the area of those forests. And I'll use at the end the city of Oakville as an example of that specific value for both the citizens and the city. I guess it's, sorry, the town of Oakville. Forest certification is a voluntary process where a forest manager or owner commits to good stewardship practices and sustainable forest management based on a set of standards developed by a third party. So not the government and not the forest manager itself. And in Canada, generally speaking, FSC, Forest Stewardship Council, and SFI, the Sustainable Forestry Initiative, make up the vast majority of certified forest area. Those are two organizations that set a very high standard for forest management. And it requires a significant commitment on the part of the forest manager and regular audits to make sure that you're adhering to those standards. The outcome is good, sustainable forest management. For some context, Canada has the largest area of certified forest in the world by far. We're a world leader in this regard, you know, even on a per area basis. So just some context for kind of where Canada sits in the rest of the world. Eastern Ontario Model Forest holds an FSC, Forest Stewardship Council, I'll just use FSC from now on, certificate, Forest Management Certificate, and it's called a group certificate. And what that allows is for smaller landowners to come together and share the costs and benefits of certification under a single certificate. The benefit of that is that forest certification requires a significant commitment, effort, time, knowledge, money, and an individual landowner or even a community forest, such as a conservation authority or municipality. That's a significant undertaking. And so we share those costs and benefits together and are able to certify forests that wouldn't otherwise be certified. The bulk of our land is made up of community forests. So this is a map of our certified forest area. You can see there's 3 conservation authorities. They're the crosshatch and 9 municipalities. Note that not the entire watershed or municipality is certified, just the forest owned by that municipality or conservation authority. We also have 100 private woodlot owners certified through our program. And so overall, we have over 74,000 hectares of certified sustainably managed forests in Southern Ontario through this program. The Forest Stewardship Council sets out 10 principles in their certification system that we must adhere to. I'm going to speak to 4 of them, the ones that are circled there, that kind of make up the core effort and core, I would say, core value and benefit for our certified forests. And I'll link those back to, again, how everybody benefits from this good forest management.
Sorry, Glenn, we just have the few remarks asking if you can switch to full mode so we can see better. Yeah, if that's possible, like the presenter mode. I think you could do.
Sorry, I thought I was on presenter mode.
Not sure how that works. if anyone is a tech savvy here and can help.
Hold on.
Oh, that looks awesome. Oh, no, it was good before. Can you go back? Share the red screen. I can read that. That's from Peter Lean-out. Thank you, Peter.
Let me, sorry, I haven't had this problem before.
Are you using two screens there?
Yeah, is that my problem?
That's your problem, yeah. You might just have to disconnect your main monitor and just use your laptop.
Did that fix it?
That's great. Wonderful.
Okay.
Keep it.
Okay, there we go. I just unplugged the plug. So there we go. Now I just gotta my sound. There we go. So Principle 3 and Principle 4 deal with Indigenous people's rights and workers' rights. And the idea is that certified forests should provide benefits and protection of rights for people who are core users and core workers in the forest, and for people who have a strong tie to the forest. So, as an example, on the left is a black ash basket that could be made by a First Nations artisan. And black ash basket making is a significant business in addition to a cultural practice. And so by having rights around access to resources enshrined in the principles of FSC, it helps facilitate that access to some of those values within the forest. That's just one, but there's many others that our certified forest managers work to protect and to work with First Nations communities or First Nations businesses or artisans in order to facilitate that access to those values. And then also the people working in the forest. They're people who live generally in the area. We want to make sure that they make a fair wage and that their rights are protected. It's a safe and good working environment. And in fact, there's an interesting link between the rights of Indigenous peoples and the rights of workers, in that the work that's being undertaken, for example, by this forwarder in a white pine plantation, is helping to restore natural forest cover where it was lost, which in turn can help restore important Indigenous values on the landscape. For example, some of those white pines will become super canopy trees, which will then provide roosting or nesting habitat for species like raven or bald eagle, which in then maintains some of those values or some of those legacies that were developed by Indigenous peoples through their management of the land and protection of those features. Part of workers' rights and community relations is making sure that the community at large is involved with the management of the forests. That can be through just informational postings like the one on the left there for a thinning that's coming up at the Kemptville campus forest, or actual events where people are brought out to the forest, or we talk about sustainable forest management, like the one on the right there. In Oakville in 2015, the dedication of a tree, the involvement of school children and other people talking about the work that Oakville has done in promoting and sustaining their forests. And that having that again enshrined in the principle means that it gets done. It has to get done. And so that positive community relations, enhances the stewardship of the forest, much like Nick was talking about some of the user groups that they work with that act as an extension of what they do. We have the same thing within our group, naturalist clubs, and other users who can act as an extension and provide value to the forest management. And all of these things are not done just at the say-so of the forest manager or myself as the representative who's managing the certificate. There are specific processes in place to verify that these values are being protected, are being enhanced. And there's two layers that I think people should be aware of. Number one, FSC requires me as the group manager to go out and inspect forests. So the picture on the left there is me inspecting a sugar sugar bush and sugaring operation to make sure that they're adhering to the principles. If I find something wrong, then I have to issue a corrective action to make sure that those forests are brought back into compliance. That my work is then checked by an auditor. So the picture on the right there is James Hallworth. He's the fellow standing up a little higher on the left of the screen, and Steve Hunter standing a little lower. And you can see there's an old foundation there. And so that was what it was on an audit a couple of weeks ago, where James came out. We spent a full week going through a number of different community forests and private woodlots and talking with them about their management. And James is out there on the ground inspecting what's going on. And he and Steve are having a discussion about how Steve identifies cultural values on the landscape, how he protects them. And you can see in the background there's some logs on the ground. There was an active operation ongoing while we were there. And so James asked many different questions, or the auditor will, to ensure that those values are being protected. And not just the cultural values, all the different principles are checked. And James has a big task of going through all the paperwork that's produced by the community forest to make sure that it's all in order. And so there's these different layers. It's not just the forest manager saying it, there's a rigorous process in place. That rigorous process really helps to build public confidence. And what it does is it maintains the use of important forest management tools, which then promotes and enhances forest values and forest health. So oftentimes what people want and value out of the forest are the same thing that the forest managers are trying to achieve, especially for our community forests. They're thinning plantations to promote the natural regeneration of native species. They're controlling invasive species. They're planting trees, but the public doesn't always understand what needs to go on to meet those objectives and goals. And so people will see the harvesting of trees as a negative thing, even though it's very important to maintain the health of that forest. They'll see the spraying of invasive species as a negative thing because they've been told that herbicides are bad, even though that's not the case when they're used appropriately. And so you can see on the left there, dog strangling vine, very thick, and then herbicide application and the removal of the dog strangling vine, so that plantation will then be thinned, kind of like what you see on the right there, a thinning operation where promote the natural regeneration of native tree species. The harvesting, the control, and use of herbicides and other similar forest management tools are very important for meeting those sustainable forest management goals. And we need to maintain those tools, and having a certification process in place, a defendable system, allows us to maintain those tools. For people within our group, there are really good opportunities for learning about best practices, for networking, and to distribute reliance and knowledge between other people within the group. So we meet on a regular basis. The photo on the right there is a certification working group meeting where the forest managers get together and they talk about challenges, they talk about new things they're trying, and they share ideas about what they're doing. It includes field tours like what you see there on the right. And that's how knowledge gets shared. That's how new ideas are tried. And that's how forest managers can also back up what they're doing. For community forests, it's also really important that it helps reduce reliance on a single highly competent individual, because it sets out forest certification sets out a very structured framework. So if something happens to that forest manager, somebody else can step in and they already have a framework in place to continue that good forest management. So all of these things are leading up to one of the biggest principles, which is Principle 6, and that's the protection of environmental values within FSC. And so our forests are actively restoring, promoting, maintaining, and enhancing biodiversity values, which is very important in a world where biodiversity loss is a significant problem. And in Ontario, we have a fairly acute problem with invasive species and the loss of species because they're being outcompeted or killed off by invasive species. So on the left, that's Kevin Predin, the forest manager for Bruce County, and you can see in the back a white pine plantation that's been thinned, really beautiful native hardwood regeneration growing up in the understory. You can't see it, but there's also many other species back there that are there because of that active management that Kevin has undertaken. The bugs, the birds, the fungi, all the little critters that are in there. You can't see them, but they're there because of the good work that Kevin's doing. And that pine plantation is doing its job. It's restoring native biodiversity to an area where it was once lost. Within the principles of FSC, we have to protect endangered species. They get special attention, and that's an important part of conserving biodiversity. Culturally important species like trillium, making sure that we have all those culturally important species as well. That's a key part too. So biodiversity and the maintenance of biodiversity is a key outcome, but also a requirement of forest certification. One thing that I don't think we've talked about a lot within the program is the enhanced product value. And I think part of that is because in the past, FSC and other certification programs were hoping that timber would be a main product of the forest, and that people would get an enhanced, an increased price for that, which would make more money for the forest owner, would make and would pay for forest certification. Generally speaking, that didn't happen. Fortunately for our community forests, timber is not necessarily a primary value for all of them. They have other values that they produce and that are important to their stakeholders and users. So we have certified maple syrup producers, and while they can put a stamp that says this maple syrup is FSC certified and came from an FSC certified forest. While that doesn't necessarily increase the value of any individual product, what it does is it drives higher value business to their business, being able to sell higher margin products like maple butter as opposed to bulk sales of syrup, returning corporate customers who are looking for gifts, and then people locally who expect when they buy a local product that it's been made in a responsible way. So it enhances that product value that they have, and in a way can help improve the sustainability and profitability of their business. For our community forests, a key product that the users, the local residents and people who use the forest value is the knowledge that the forests that they are using are being well managed. That beautiful paths like you see on the right will be there in the future. That practices are conserving the wildlife and biodiversity that while the users may not see on a regular basis, they know is there and value. And so that's an important product for the community forest to produce, and being able to put up a sign like in Lanark County that says we are FSC certified. You can enjoy this place and know that it's being well managed and there's a strong commitment to that sustainable management. That's an important value. That's an important thing to provide for our users, especially in this past couple of years where we've seen so many more people out in the forest. Carbon sequestration and offsets are another component. We know that managed forests, ones that are well managed, sequester carbon at an increased rate compared to ones that are not. And we have the ability through forest certification. It's a prerequisite for selling carbon offsets. On the right there, that's from our audit, our FSC audit, and the folks in the picture there are on Quinte Conservation lands in an actual carbon plot where the carbon in the area has been measured, and that's what the numbers on the trees are. And Quinte is moving towards selling carbon from their lands into the carbon market, which provides an additional product and revenue for community forests. So I'd like to end with more of a specific example of what all this value means, meeting all these different principles. What does it mean for a specific forest? And so with the town of Oakville, they are known not just provincially but nationally, and even I've learned this morning internationally, for their progressive and proactive forest management. And when you're a proactive forest manager, you're dealing with invasive species, you're trying to improve health, and that requires things like removing buckthorn, like you see on the top right. But the average person might just see trees being cut down, or it means removing ash trees in a key way to protect people from the hazard, but also to allow the natural regeneration of other species, which is what you see on the bottom there. The top left are ash logs. The bottom below that is a restoration site after the ash has been removed. In the case of the ash, City of Oakville, or the town of Oakville, had a very upset citizen about the removal of those trees. They didn't understand what was going on. And the town forest manager had a talk with this resident, but the resident was not satisfied with that. And it was escalated to the level of my predecessor, Jim Hendry, who was the certification coordinator before I was. And Jim was able to talk with them and talk about what FSC is, what it means, what other community forests are doing, and then be able to satisfy that person. And this is a common thing that happens for the city of Oakville, where FSC is an important backstop that allows them to back up what they're doing, to say that what they're doing is sustainable. On the right there, you see buckthorn removal. You see insecticide application going on there on the bottom right. The city of Oakville at the beginning the residents didn't take kindly to herbicide application in their forests. But through education, through reassurance with FSC, where the city of Oakville got to was a place where the citizens now, many of them understand why these things are going on, why they're important for forest health. And they're actually calling into the city and asking for service requests when they see invasive species. They're flagging them. So we're going from a place of frustration and skepticism to a place of proactive, assistance to the town. And that's because the town does a good job and they're backstopped by FSC. They have something that's very defendable to fall back on. So why do you want to certify a forest? Well, there's another list. I've already gone through kind of all the different benefits, but there are other ones in that list, like the confidence to harvest, which can be important for private woodlot owners, especially new ones who don't understand sustainable forest management. Being certified, knowing that you're meeting one of the highest standards in the world, can allow them to take steps to undertake important harvests that are good for forest health. And there's many others there too. If anybody has any questions, I would be happy to speak with them on what the benefits are or what's entailed in certification. I didn't get into that part. I talked more about the benefits, but that kind of wraps up what I wanted to say. And I think I just conclude by saying forest certification is the insurance policy that we're maintaining biodiversity, that we're getting buy-in and proactive management from our citizens, and that we have a very rigorous and defendable system to rely on and to use to achieve our goals of sustainable forest management. So with that, I will conclude and look forward to some questions at the end.
Thanks a lot, Glenn. A lot of neat example, and I'll make sure to buy my maple syrup with FSC certification now on. Anyway, moving on, our third speaker is Nick Godram. I hope I said it right. So Nick is going to tell us how a provincial forest in the Ottawa Valley has been managing for biodiversity, carbon capture, and community benefit. So about Nick, he's a registered professional forester with over 30 years of experience working in Ontario's Boreal and Great Lakes St. Lawrence forest regions. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in forestry from the University of Toronto and a Master of Science degree in environmental management from the University of London. He is currently the General Manager of Ottawa Valley Forest Inc. Incorporated. Ottawa Valley Forest Inc., or OVFI, is a proud member of Ontario's forest industry and the holder of the Sustainable Forest License, SFL, for the Ottawa Valley Forest. OVFE of Pembroke is responsible for management planning and the implementation of forest management activities on the Ottawa Valley Forest. So I'll let you, Nick, to share your screen.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Let's see if we can't get this. Okay. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we do.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's do some adjustments here just a second. Okay, so what I'm going to be talking about is managing for biodiversity and climate change on the Ottawa Valley Forest. I've changed the title somewhat, just in the interest of time. So The Ottawa Valley Forest is managed by Ottawa Valley Forest Inc. And Ottawa Valley Forest Inc. is a cooperative forest management company established in 1998, consisting of a group of 10 local wood processing facilities and logging contractors. The company holds a sustainable forest license for the Ottawa Valley Forest. And with that, we're responsible for all the forest management, planning, implementation, and reporting. And our office is located in Pembroke. So here's a map of the Ottawa Valley Forest. Those of you who are familiar with Renfrew County will recognize that this is a map of Renfrew County. And that's because the boundaries of the Ottawa Valley Forest overlap exactly with Renfrew County. We manage all the Crown land in Renfrew County, which is about 322,000 hectares, and that's the area shown as the light green here on the map. And there's areas set aside for parks and protected areas, about 14,000 hectares of that. The area of Crown managed forest land is 234,000 hectares. And just to help people who maybe are not familiar with the area, this is Highway 17 that runs down through the entire forest. The forest is bounded by the Ottawa River on the east and Algonquin Park on the west. So just an aside, management of the Ottawa Valley Forest has been certified to the Forest Stewardship Council standard since 2010. Our current certificate is valid through to November 26th. 2026. So because we operate on Crown land, we have to follow the Crown Sustainability Act. And as you can see, there's a lot of rules that we have to follow following that act. There are 4 regulated manuals. I'm only showing 3 here. The 3 that are most important for forest management planning are the planning manual, the forest information manual, and the forest operations and silviculture manual. The 4th one is the scaling manual. So there's a number of guides that we have to follow as well. There's 5 here. That includes the stand site guide, the landscape guide, silviculture guide, the cultural heritage guide, and the resource-based tourism guide. And all this comes together to form a very robust forest management system that we have in Ontario. And it's because of all this, the robustness of this system that we were able to get FSC certification quite easily, relatively easily. So moving on to managing for biodiversity. So the direction is primarily provided by the landscape guide and the stand and site guide. Using this coarse filter, fine filter approach. And anyone who's familiar with these guides will recognize this diagram, which showing how the coarse filter, fine filter works. So the coarse filter basically uses various management measures at a variety of scales to emulate natural disturbances and patterns to provide for a very broad range of habitats. And it's applied at the site and landscape levels. There's the fine filter, which provides specific management measures for specific values. And these are the values that basically fall through the cracks in the coarse filter. Example is heron nests. While the coarse filter may provide the habitat for herons, they are susceptible to noise disturbances. So the fine filter might put a reserve on the nesting colony, as well as putting a timing restriction for operations so that they're not disturbed during the nesting season. Another one is ginseng. That's a species at risk. So there's going to be some societal concerns about that one. And so there would be specific protection measures for ginseng. So applying the coarse filter at the landscape level, this landscape direction is applied during strategic planning when we're developing our forest management plan. So it uses simulated ranges of natural variation for a number of attributes. And these simulated ranges of natural variation are determined through forest disturbance and succession modeling done by the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. How it works is that we have to be, when we're doing our forest management plans, we need to ensure that we are within or moving toward the SRNV for a number of indicators, including landscape class, old growth, young forest, forest pattern. And this is determined using spatial and non-spatial computer modeling tools, such as the Strategic Forest Management Model, which is a non-spatial model that we use, the Ontario Landscape Tool, and the Evaluate Forest Residual Tool. And you can see an example of this. This is the output. If people can see my my mouse pointer here, but this is the output of the Ontario Landscape Tool for one of the forest pattern indicators, which is proportion of mature and old forest at the 50 hectare scale. It's just showing, you know, the dark green areas are the have the higher proportion of mature and old, and the brown areas have the lower proportion. And so the idea is that we have to be within the different proportion classes within the SRNV. So how this impacts operations on the ground, it impacts the allowable harvest level, the harvest recipe that we have. So that's how much area we can harvest by forest type and age class. And the spatial arrangement of harvest allocations on the forest, depending on whether you pass some of these spatial assessments, and also including establishment of residual forest patches. At the site, it's a little less, it's a little simpler. So it's all about structure and composition. So we're required to retain wildlife trees on every area cut, down woody debris. There's requirements for residual forest retention. So residual forest is defined as anything with 50 to 60% or greater than 50-60% canopy closure that will still act as habitat. There's also the partial cutting systems that we utilize here in the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Forest, specifically the shelterwood selection system, that provide a lot of structure, vertical structure, as well as some species diversity. So here's just an example of what wildlife trees, a typical clear cut with wildlife tree retention looks like. So the idea is that we have to leave it a minimum of 25 trees per hectare, and there's a number of other rules that we have to follow. Generally, though, you can leave them in patches or evenly distributed across the disturbance area. So here's just an example. We've got a nice clumping of small trees. There's requirements to retain larger trees as well, and so here's an example of a large poplar that's being retained. Here on the left, there's just it's an aerial image of showing an area that's been harvested and just showing the retention of down woody debris after harvest. Okay, so the fine filter is applied through prescriptions for areas of concern. So that's just an area around a value that needs to be protected. In our plan, we have 73 separate prescriptions, and here on the right is just a listing of them that comes from our operations maps, from the legend and operations maps. This isn't the complete listing, of course, because many of the values on our forests are confidential, so we can't show them. But the ones that we can show, this is a listing. So how the fine filter is applied, it includes things like no harvest reserves around the value, residual forest retention along the value, and timing restrictions are the most common approaches. The other thing I mentioned is that we have conditions on regular operations. There's 26 of them, and that's for things that you encounter as you go about just doing your regular operations. And a couple examples are retention of bat roost trees or butternut trees, which is a species at risk. So how does this look on the ground? So what I have here is an aerial image of one of our a fairly large operating area that we've had in the last few years. And to the right is the forest operations prescription map. And what it's showing here is it's colored by a silvicultural system. So the dark green areas are the shelterwood, white pine shelterwood areas. The light green areas are clear cut. Some brown patches here are areas that have been bypassed. And that can be bypassed for a number of reasons. Usually merchantability, but sometimes they are bypassed for habitat purposes. And here you can see some values, and you'll see that there's some a buffer on that, and that's just the application of that fine filter I was talking about, air concern planning. So here on the image, you can see the retention of seed trees under the shelterwood system for the white pine here. Up here is more of a traditional clear cut. You can see evidence of the wildlife tree retention. I mentioned that this is this image is taken with leaf off condition. So the conifers stick out, but the hardwoods are harder to see. Down here we have a clear cut with seed tree retention, white pine seed tree retention. You can see the individual seed trees here. Along this creek system, you can see the buffering of the fine filter approach. And you can also see here these residual patches that they're bypass areas, but they are acting like residual patches in the cut. So there's one here and one over here. Okay, changing gears a little bit to talk a little bit about climate change, carbon capture. So we don't necessarily plan for carbon capture. We do plan for renewing the forest, and the best way to capture carbon is to be growing young, vigorous forest that's sequestering lots of carbon. So in the last 10 years, we've planted over 5.1 million trees, and we've established renewal on approximately 12,000 hectares. Generally, our free to grow success rate is over 90%. So we're successful in regenerating the forest over 90% of the time in the allotted time frame. Generally, all the forest regenerates itself eventually, but within the expected time frame, we're well over 90%. And there's just a couple of examples. We have red pine plantation in a white pine seed tree cut. So you can see the white pine seed trees here in the background. Some healthy red pine seedlings. Talking about species diversity, we've got there's a white pine natural here, and it looks possibly oak as well over here. On the right side is a typical poplar clear cut that regenerates quite well on its own. The majority of our regeneration is natural regeneration, and this is a good example. So for climate change adaptation, what we're doing there is we're looking at assisted migration of southern seed sources and southern tree species. So to do this, we've established trials planting southern origin white pine and red oak. In 2016, we planted about 30,000 red oak that came from seed zone 36. Seed zone 36 is an area basically that runs from Ottawa down to Kingston and along the north shore of Lake Ontario. So it's fairly southern to us. In 2019, we established a trial using Cayuga seed orchard white pine. The Cayuga seed orchard is from just outside of Hamilton, I believe. So it's quite south to us. So we've tried that. There was a trial on our forest many years ago that included that seed source, and it does do fairly well on our forest. So we decided to do more trials. And the map here on the right is just a map of the trial in 2019. So this Cayuga seed or seedlings were planted in a shelterwood condition and also in a clear cut with seed tree condition, just to see how it would react in a more open area. In 2021, so just this past spring, we planted more Cayuga and Scugog seed orchard white pine, about 4,000, in more of a operational context. And in the future, we're looking at planting white oak, black cherry, black walnut, and hickory. Small trials of those to see how they performed. And that's all I had. So I guess we can go to questions.
Thanks a lot, Nick. Was great. Thank you so much for the explanation. I don't know if we have any students there, but it's like 6 months of your degree, basically a forestry degree that was explained in 15 minutes. So great job. So we are on time. So we have like I think 15 minutes for questions. I don't see any question right now, but just wanted to encourage again everyone, if you have any question to one of the speakers, to send it to the chat. I'm just going to through. So we had just looking through the message.
You have one in the Q&A too. Yeah, from Sandra Long.
Oh, thanks so much. Yeah, I didn't see that. These two screens. So where are we mapping EPRE, ETC, ETRA of Great Lakes and Lawrence Forest? Great Lakes and Forest. Where are we in mapping of Great Lakes and Lawrence Forest? So I guess it would be for you, Nick G.
Where are we? But where is the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Forest? Is that the question, or
no? Where are we in mapping? Can you see that as well? Where are we in mapping EPRI, ETCETRR of Great Lakes and Lawrence Forest?
I can't see that. Where do I look for the question?
There's the chat and the question and answer. Just let me send you that. Maybe in the chat.
Okay, I think I see it now.
Yeah, I just copied and pasted it in there so you could see the exact
Oh yeah,
question.
thanks, Glenn. You were faster than me.
I'm not sure what she's asking, to be honest.
Okay, and hence
I'll allow Sandra to talk for a minute here. I can unmute her.
Oh, awesome.
Sandra, can you unmute yourself and just ask that question, clarify it, please?
Okay, I'm speaking about something that the Eastern Ontario Model Forest, and right from the very beginning, was very concerned about the inadequacy of the enhanced forest resource inventories through all these wonderful new modern ways of mapping and identifying all the features on the total landscape of Eastern Ontario, including wetlands and all the various aspects of the landscape. The soils have been done for Eastern Ontario, but the mapping has been done. Some municipalities are now taking it into their own hands. I know that this was a request made to the last Minister of Natural Resources and Forestry, Mr. Yakubuski, that there needed to be better and more sophisticated and fully done mapping of and we always used to use enhanced forest resource inventory, but it's become much more sophisticated than that. The reply that we got back was that it was already being done, but he was a little mixed up between the boreal forest and the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Forest. Got a little blast from the University of Guelph on that. But this has been something that right from the beginning of the Eastern Ontario Model Forest, we were really pushing hard for it, but making some progress and then virtually being shot down.
Okay, I know what you're talking about now. So our forest, we've got a complete forest inventory for our forest. It's one of the older ones actually in the province. It's based on 1996 imagery, but it has been thoroughly updated with each planning iteration that we've gone through. So it's been fully updated for 2021. What what's going to happen in the future is that the province is flying LiDAR, I believe, across the province, and they've started in the north. They haven't done any down in southern Ontario, except for, I believe, Algonquin Park was done, as well as the Petawawa Research Forest. But we are in the queue to get LiDAR done. In terms of our forest, we are looking to get a new inventory at some point in the near future. Does that answer the question?
I asked her to unmute again.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
I just wanted to know if that was a promise, because I know, being a founding board member of the Eastern Ontario Model Forest, it has been over the years a very, very frustrating matter.
There have been great strides in inventory quality and production, Sandra.
Yes, yes.
Thanks.
And we want to have it, we want to see it done throughout the entire Great Lakes, St. Lawrence forest. Like, we've got patches of really productive people, and like Prescott and Russell has done some great work voluntarily, but there are many areas that like we've got the Frontenac Arch where they've done a lot of work, but it would sure be wonderful if they could have if this could be done. But you're saying we're in the queue. How far down in the queue are we?
Well, I've recently asked that question regarding our forest, and I wasn't given a date. I'm thinking it'll probably be 2 to 3 years from now.
We better go on to some other questions. Thanks, Sandra.
Yeah, thank you. So we have another question. I'll try to go in order. We have another question from Michael Rosen for about the OVF forest. So do you know offhand what the management guidelines you use for broad-winged oak nests?
Yeah, that would come from the stand and site guide. So a few years ago, the ministry consolidated all their guides into two main guides, the stand site guide and landscape guide. So that direction would come from the stand site guide.
Okay, I'll switch to the next question. I can't see it all from Tom. You've seen the name. Okay. I'm sorry, I don't see the full name. How much damage is being caused by gypsy moth LDD in your area? I think it's not directly specifically, but I think it could be for you, Nick, maybe, or even for Glenn, who wants to answer.
I can start off. We did have a fair bit of gypsy moth defoliation in the southern end of our forest, particularly around Calabogie. It was quite intense and severe this past year. My understanding is the population has declined. I think for the future, we haven't seen a lot of egg masses, so the population may have crashed.
Okay, great, thank you. Glenn, do you have anything to add to that?
I mean, our forest, certified forest area spans the entire province. I know the area outside of Ottawa, some of those community forests were hit hard. But beyond that kind of anecdote, I don't have specific information. Yeah, that would be more the specific forest managers would be able to speak to that of the different community forests.
Okay, great, thanks. So we have a question from James Farrell for Nick. Over the last 100 years, we have seen waves to urban tree epidemics. So it would be for Nick Stowe. We have seen waves to urban tree epidemics, chestnut, elm, maybe butternut. More recently, ash with threats to maple and possibly others. What special measures are you considering in selecting resilient species for future planting for Ottawa?
Well, I mean, it's a great question. And of course, the most recent impact has been from emerald ash borer, and we saw the loss of entire loss of trees along entire streets where ash had been planted. the urban forest management plan that my colleague Martha Copestake brought forward several years ago specifically addresses increasing our resiliency to future threats like that. And of course, the main action is just ensuring that we have a more diverse urban forest. So we look now at our forestry services group now looks at a broader range of species that are better adapted. Apologies for that. Species that are better adapted to an urban environment. So we'll no longer see a street that will have an entire row of elm trees or ash trees, but it will be more resilient when those impacts do arrive.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Nick. I don't see any more questions. I don't think I missed any. No, I think we're good. You sure? No more questions? We have 5 more
Actually, I
minutes.
see Jim McCready. Jim McCready has his hand up. Let's see, I could unmute him and see.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. I don't see him. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Just got to ask him to unmute here. Allow to talk. Oop, I hit the wrong person. And Jim's disappeared on me here. I don't know if he's actually left the Zoom or not. Yeah, Jim's not available anymore that I can see. Oh, there he is. So Jim, if you had a question, please unmute yourself.
Actually, I didn't have a question. Sorry.
Oh, you just had your hand up by accident. Okay, no problem, Jim. Nice to hear your voice, though. I promoted you to a panelist. I'll have to unpromote you now.
Well, it's nice because now I found out how to see if there's raised hands. I didn't know that trick. Okay, I'm just looking through the list. If you have any question and you just want to speak out, you prefer that way, just raise your hands. If it's easier, looking through that. No one. Okay. Well, we are just 5 minutes ahead of schedule, so we're good. So I think we'll go ahead and close the event, and we'll have a few closing words from John Pino. So John, go ahead.
Thank you, Annonciade. Just on behalf of the Eastern Ontario Model Forest, the Canadian Institute of Forestry, Ottawa Valley Section, and the Ontario Woodlot Association, we just want to say thanks to our presenters and panelists today, Nick Stowe, Glenn Prevost, and Nick Goodram. And just great presentations, very insightful and informative, and we're getting some comments now. These Christmas or December webinars have been a long history, and I can remember going to many of them when I was executive director of CIF and in other roles. And it's unfortunate, but we can't have the nice turkey lunch that we usually had in Kemptville in this particular forum. But maybe we'll be returning to that. And I see Lacey is saying, yeah, maybe we can see everyone in person next year. Not even a blizzard today. It would have worked out great. Yeah, I remember driving in some blizzards to get to it. It was so good and so nice to get together. And yeah, the turkey lunch was always a highlight, of course. But this worked out, and we do what we have to do in these times. And again, just thanks to everyone for participating, for joining in, and again to our panelists and presenters. It was great. And thank you, Annonciade, for great moderation and a good job. And thanks to the committee that pulled the agenda together, Tony and Ken, and I'm going to forget everybody, but we had a lot of back and forth. Joe Annonciade, who couldn't be with us today, he's traveling, but he was involved too, and it came together really well. So it's really nice. I don't know. I could see if anyone else wants to say anything. Ken or Tony, give you the final word, I guess. But we're just getting lots of good comments and kudos for the panelists and for the presentation. So again, thanks. That's all I have to say today. This will be available as a recording, and you can review it at your leisure, and a lot of other people will get to see it. We'll have it up on the YouTube channel and LinkedIn, in all kinds of media pretty soon.
Thank you, Jen.
So we'll say goodbye to everyone. I'll shut her down. Bye, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Have a great day.
Have a good one.